A millionaire CEO saw his ex-wife selling churros with triplets after 6 years, and he's shocked by a secret she's been hiding, one that will change their lives forever. Before we begin, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. John Baker was driving past the traffic light when something in the square on his left made his heart freeze. It felt like time stopped in a single instant. "Stop the car, now," he ordered, his voice dry and urgent. The driver hit the brakes. John's eyes locked onto a small churro cart, painted red and white. Without another word, he opened the door and stepped out. He walked slowly, like someone approaching a ghost. The closer he got, the harder his heart pounded, stirring memories he thought he had buried long ago. Behind the churro cart, a woman moved with steady, experienced hands. For a moment, time stood still. John froze. It was her. Zoe Cooper, his ex-wife, the woman he hadn't seen in 6 years. Zoe looked at him with an unreadable expression, part surprise, part challenge. No tears, no sign of weakness. Just that same firm look he remembered from their fights years ago, when she always had the last word. But there was something more. Next to the cart, playing with bits of dough and laughing, were 3 boys, about 5 years old. Dark hair, light brown eyes, the same mischievous smile he saw every morning in the mirror. John felt the air leave his lungs. The boys looked exactly like him. Zoe caught his stare and crossed her arms. Her voice was firm, with a sharp touch of irony. "Do you want it with dulce de leche, or with regret?" He stood there, frozen. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled on his tongue. All that came out was a shaky whisper. "Zoe, She cut him off effortlessly, as if seeing him was nothing new. "I sell churros now, not apologies." The silence between them grew heavy. The contrast was cruel. A man in an expensive suit, surrounded by power, facing a simple woman with an apron and work-worn hands. John glanced around. The cart was modest but well cared for. There was a line of customers, kids laughing, people praising the churros. And in the middle of it all, Zoe looked completely at peace. So different from him. Living in luxury but never feeling this grounded. He tried to steady his voice. "I didn't know that." "That I still exist?" she interrupted. "Yeah, surprise." The words hit him like a blow. He lowered his eyes, trying to gather himself. But before he could say anything else, one of the children ran up to Zoe, tugging at her apron. "Mom, the churro burned." She quickly turned to fix it, leaving John standing alone, watching. 3 identical boys, calling her Mom. His mind was spinning. Were they his sons? Zoe came back with the calm of someone fully in control. "If you're not buying, step aside. I've got customers." He hesitated. He wanted to say he needed to talk, to understand, but nothing came out. He just nodded and stepped back. "Zoe, are you okay?" She raised an eyebrow. "Better than before. Does that answer your question?" The words echoed inside him like a sentence. The boys were watching curiously. One of them whispered to the other, "He looks like the dad from the cartoon." Zoe heard it, hid a smile, and kept serving churros. John felt the ground shift beneath him. Everything he had built, the buildings, the empire, the pride, suddenly seemed small compared to this simple moment. He stepped back, looked at her one more time. Zoe didn't look away. She held the churro tons tightly and asked, with a hint of playful challenge, "Do you want sugar, or are you already sweet enough?" He swallowed hard. "I'll take one, with dulce de leche." She calmly served it, handed him the paper bag, and said flatly, "That'll be $15. He paid, but his hands trembled. The dulce de leche dripped down the side of the bag, and the heat of the churro burned hotter than expected. Zoe turned to the next customer, ending the moment as if he were just another person in line. Next. John stood there, not knowing what to do. He took a bite, but the taste, once a symbol of happiness, now had a bitter edge. Each memory hit like a punch. The arguments, the promises, the day he walked away, leaving her with tearful eyes and a broken heart. He looked one last time at the boys, who were playing on the sidewalk, tossing bits of dough at each other and laughing. And then he noticed something that completely disarmed him. One of them had the same dimple on his cheek as him. John's heart tightened. He turned, got into the car, and took a deep breath before starting the engine. The reflection in the rearview mirror showed Zoe serving another customer, completely calm, as if that encounter had meant nothing. But for him, that moment changed everything. As the car drove through the streets of Los Angeles, the taste of the churro still lingered in his mouth, sweet, warm, and painfully familiar. And for the first time in a long while, John Baker felt the weight of regret. The man who conquered the world realized he might have lost the only place he truly belonged. Night fell over Los Angeles, but John Baker couldn't close his eyes. Lying on the king-size bed in his luxurious apartment, he stared at the ceiling as if all the answers he needed were written there. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the distant sound of city traffic. He turned to one side, then the other, but nothing helped. The image of Zoe behind that churro cart kept returning like a stubborn ghost. And the boys. Those 3 identical little boys with light eyes and mischievous smiles, were they really his sons? He closed his eyes, and this time the memories rushed in like a storm. 7 years ago, everything was different. He and Zoe worked together at a small bakery called Sweet Dreams, right in the heart of Venice Beach. The place was modest, with only 6 tables and a glass counter full of homemade sweets. Zoe made the best cupcakes in the area, and he handled deliveries and the cash register. They were happy. At least, he thought they were. He remembered the mornings when they arrived early to open the shop, still holding hands. Zoe would hum while preparing the batter, and he would sneak pieces of chocolate just to make her pretend to be mad. But then came the offer. An investor gave John the chance to enter the real estate market. It was risky, demanded total dedication, and meant leaving the bakery behind. Zoe begged him not to go. She said they had enough, that they were happy, that money wasn't everything. He disagreed. The argument was ugly. Harsh words were spoken, and in the heat of the moment, John threw in her face that he was tired of living a small life. Zoe answered that she preferred a small life filled with love over a big one with no meaning. He slammed the door and never came back. John opened his eyes, feeling the weight of that memory. He got out of bed, walked to the window, and looked down at the glowing city below. He had built everything he dreamed of: buildings, contracts, millions. But he had never again tasted a cupcake made by Zoe. Now, seeing her again, he realized something that hurt more than regret itself. She had built her own life, without him, without his help, without needing anything he could offer. And she seemed happy. While John wrestled with his memories in his empty apartment, on the other side of the city, Zoe Cooper sat in the small living room of her house, holding a cup of hot tea. In front of her was her best friend, Claire Thompson, a woman with curly red hair and contagious energy. Claire watched Zoe with a concerned look. So he just showed up out of nowhere? Zoe took a sip of tea and shrugged, as if the topic didn't matter. He showed up, bought a churro, left. End of story. Claire raised an eyebrow. Zoe, you're talking about the man who left you pregnant and disappeared. That's not exactly a regular churro purchase. Zoe let out a short laugh without humor. Technically, he didn't know I was pregnant. I found out after he left. And you never told him? For what? Zoe lifted her cup as if making a toast. Not every millionaire buys a conscience, Claire. Money fixes a lot of things, but character isn't for sale. Claire shook her head but couldn't hide a smile. You and your punchlines. Zoe shrugged, but her firm tone started to crack. He chose success. I chose the boys. We both made our choices. And now he's back. He's not back, Zoe corrected quickly. He just showed up. That's different. Claire crossed her arms. Zoe, he saw the boys. 3 little boys who look exactly like him. Do you really think he's just going to ignore that? Zoe stayed silent. She looked at the cup in her hands, and for a moment, the sarcasm gave way to something more fragile. A flash of pain crossed her eyes, but she blinked quickly, pushing away a stubborn tear. I don't know, Claire, and honestly, I don't want to know. But they both knew that was a lie. Claire sighed and changed the subject. And the boys? Did they ask anything? Zoe smiled, this time genuinely. Ethan said the man looked like the dad from the cartoon. Mason asked if he was famous, and Liam, well, Liam just wanted to know if he was coming back to buy more churros. They both laughed, but Zoe's laugh had a bitter taste. Claire touched her friend's hand. You built a beautiful life, Zoe, with or without him. The boys are amazing, you are strong, and no one can take that away from you. Zoe nodded, but the words felt too heavy to fully believe. I know. It's just that seeing him again stirred things I thought were buried. And are they? Zoe hesitated. I don't know. maybe they never were. Silence filled the room for a few seconds. Then Claire stood up and gave her friend a light pat on the shoulder. Look, no matter what happens, you're not alone. If he tries anything, I'm with you. And if he tries to buy your forgiveness with money, I'll throw his wallet in the trash. Zoe laughed, finally with sincerity. Thank you, Claire. Always. After Claire left, Zoe stayed alone in the room. She looked out the window and watched the streetlights blink softly. She thought about John, about that expensive suit, the lost look in his eyes, the way he was left speechless when he saw the boys. Part of her wanted to scream, to tell him he had no right to come back now. Another part, smaller and more vulnerable, wanted to understand why he showed up at this moment. But Zoe Cooper was no longer the naive girl from 7 years ago. She had learned to survive, to fight, to raise 3 children on her own while balancing the churro cart and the bills. She didn't need anyone. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. Meanwhile, across the city, John Baker sat at his office desk, even though it was the middle of the night. In front of him was a folder with investment documents he wasn't even looking at. His mind was elsewhere. He picked up his phone and opened the browser. He typed Zoe Cooper's name and pressed enter. Nothing. No social media, no relevant public record. It was as if she had disappeared from the digital world. But he had seen her. He had seen the boys. And now he needed answers. John closed his laptop and made a decision. He would find out the truth about the triplets. And more than that, he needed to understand what remained between him and Zoe after so many years of silence. It wouldn't be easy. She had made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him. But John Baker didn't build an empire by giving up at the first obstacle. This time, however, it wasn't about business. It was about something much bigger, and he had no idea how to handle it. The night went on in silence, but both John and Zoe knew that meeting again had changed everything. The past, which seemed buried, rose to the surface like a wound still raw, and neither of them was prepared for what would come next. The next morning, John Baker was at the office earlier than usual. Sitting in his leather chair, he drummed his fingers on the desk while looking out the window. The city of Los Angeles was waking up slowly, but his mind had been racing for hours. The door opened and Derek Hayes entered, his driver and perhaps the only person John really considered a friend. Derek was in his early 40s, his gray hair neatly trimmed and a permanent smile on his face. He was the kind of man who found humor in any situation. "Good morning, boss. Looks like it was a long night, huh?" John turned in his chair. "Derek, I need a favor." Derek raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms. "If it involves driving to Las Vegas at dawn, the answer is no. My wife still hasn't forgiven me for last time." John almost smiled. "Nothing like that. I need your help with something. More discreet." "Discreet?" Derek sat in the chair opposite the desk. "Now you've got my curiosity. What is it?" John hesitated for a moment, then decided to be direct. "I need to follow someone." Derek's eyes widened. "Follow? Like a private detective?" "Boss, have you been watching too many crime movies?" "It's nothing illegal," John hurried to explain. "It's just observation. I need to understand a few things." Derek leaned forward, a curious smile on his face. "Is this about the woman with the churro cart you mentioned yesterday in the car?" John fell silent, which was answer enough. Derek clapped his hands. "I knew it. Man, you've had that haunted look since yesterday. Who is she?" "My ex-wife." The smile left Derek's face, replaced by genuine surprise. "Zoe? The one you mentioned once, years ago?" John nodded. "That's her. And I need to know more about her life now." Derek leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "I get it. And why don't you just talk to her?" "Because she dismissed me like I was a stranger. I need to understand what's going on before I try any conversation." Derek sighed and shook his head. "Okay. But if we get arrested for invading her privacy, you're paying my bail." John smiled for the first time since he woke up. "Deal." A few hours later, John and Derek were in the car, parked a safe distance from the churro cart. Zoe was already there, arranging the ingredients and getting everything ready for another day of work. The 3 boys were running around the cart, playing and laughing. Derek watched everything carefully. "So those are the boys?" John nodded, without taking his eyes off them. "Yes." "Man, they look just like you. There's no denying it." John swallowed hard. Seeing the boys from afar was different than seeing them up close. Every gesture, every smile, every movement felt like a mirror of himself as a child. Derek noticed the tension. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I am." "Then let's go." When Zoe got on the bike with the cart attached and started moving down the street, John and Derek followed her quietly by car. She stopped in front of a small house where an elderly woman was waiting on the porch. Zoe got off the bike and handed the woman a bag of churros. The woman smiled and tried to pay. Zoe refused, gave her a hug, and moved on. Derek watched in awe. She didn't charge her. John noticed it too. No, she didn't. Farther ahead, Zoe stopped again, this time in front of a school. Some children ran up to her, and Zoe handed out churros for free, talking and laughing with each of them. Derek shook his head. "Boss, this woman is a saint." John didn't reply. He just watched, surprised and, in a way, ashamed. Zoe wasn't just raising triplets on her own. She also found time to help her neighbors and spread kindness wherever she went. Her strength and independence were undeniable. After a few more stops, Zoe returned to the neighborhood where she lived. It was a modest area with small houses and tree-lined streets. She parked the cart in front of a yellow house with a small garden out front. The boys got off the bike and ran inside, laughing and arguing about who would get there first. John and Derek stayed in the car, watching from a distance. "Now what?" Derek asked. John opened the door. "Now I'm going to talk to her." Derek grabbed his arm. "Are you sure? She doesn't seem too welcoming." "I have to try." John got out of the car and slowly walked toward the cart. Zoe was busy cleaning the grill and organizing the utensils. When she noticed him, she stopped and crossed her arms. "You again?" Before John could answer, the three boys ran out of the house and stopped beside Zoe. They looked at John curiously. The youngest one, with messy hair and bright eyes, took a step forward. "Hi, you came back." John smiled, a little awkward. "Hi, yes I did." The boy tilted his head, curious. "What's your name?" "John. John Baker." The boy's eyes widened. "John, really? Really? Why?" The boy looked at his brothers and then back at John. "Are you famous?" John frowned, confused. "Famous? Not exactly. Why do you think that?" The boy shrugged. "Because Mom talks a lot about some guy named John." The silence that followed was deafening. John felt the ground disappear under his feet. His legs went weak. Zoe turned red and quickly pulled the boys back. "Ethan, inside!" "But Mom, now!" The three boys ran back inside, laughing among themselves. Zoe stood still, looking at John with a mix of irritation and embarrassment. John tried to say something, but nothing came out. Derek, watching from afar, murmured to himself, "Looks like the past came back with interest and emotional correction, boss." Zoe, still red, crossed her arms and lifted her chin. "What do you want, John?" He took a deep breath. "I want to talk. Really talk." "About what?" "About everything. About the boys. About us." Zoe laughed, but without humor. "There is no us, John. You took care of that 7 years ago." "I know, and you have every right to hate me. But please give me a chance to explain." Zoe stared at him for a long moment. There was anger there, but also exhaustion, and maybe a touch of curiosity. "Explain what? That you left me to become a millionaire? That you chose money over me? That you never looked back?" Each word was a knife. John knew he deserved it. "I made a mistake, Zoe. A big one. But please, let me try to fix it." Zoe was silent. Then, surprisingly, she let out a bitter laugh. "Fix it? John, you don't fix 7 years of absence with one conversation. That's not how it works." "I know, but I can try." She shook her head and turned away. "Go away, John." "Zoe, go. Away." John stood there for a few more seconds, watching her clean the cart with sharp, angry movements. He knew insisting now would be useless. He went back to the car, where Derek waited with a sympathetic look. "So?" John got in and closed the door. "She doesn't want to talk." Derek started the engine. "It's not like you were expecting anything different, right?" John looked out the window, watching Zoe disappear from view. "No, but I had to try." Derek drove in silence for a few minutes before speaking. "You know you're not going to give up, right?" John gave a small smile. "No, I'm not." "So what are you going to do?" John thought for a moment. "I'm going to talk to her, not as a businessman, as a man, as someone who made the biggest mistake of his life and wants a chance to make it right." Derek shook his head. "Good luck, boss. You're going to need it." John knew Derek was right. Winning Zoe back wouldn't be easy. It might even be impossible. But he had to try, because for the first time in years, he realized everything he built meant nothing without her. The next day, John woke up with a determination he hadn't felt in years. He didn't have a perfect plan, only the certainty that he needed to talk to Zoe. Really talk this time. Derek drove him to her neighborhood in the middle of the afternoon, when things at the cart usually slowed down. When they arrived, Zoe was organizing the utensils at the cart. She noticed the black car parked across the street and lifted her eyes. The moment she saw John getting out, her expression changed instantly. She dropped the dish towel and crossed her arms, watching him approach with hesitant steps. Seriously, Zoe shot before he even got close. Now you want to play detective? John stopped a few feet away. Zoe, let me guess. She cut him off with a sarcastic smile. You were just passing by again? What a coincidence, right? It's like all of Los Angeles fits into the path of your fancy car. Derek, still inside the vehicle, muttered to himself. This woman doesn't spare anyone. John took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I just want to understand, Zoe. She let out a short, ironic laugh. Understand? You never wanted to understand, John. You always wanted to win. The blow hit hard. John felt the weight of those words, but he didn't step back. I know I was an idiot. I know I made terrible choices, but please, give me a chance to. To what? Zoe stepped closer, her eyes shining with anger. To fix it? To make up for 7 years of absence with one nice conversation? That's not how it works, John. He lowered his head for a moment, searching for the right words. I know that's not how it works, but at least let me try. Zoe stared at him for a long moment. There was anger in her eyes, but also something deeper. Something she was trying to hide. You want to try? Then tell me one thing. Why now? Why show up after 7 years? John hesitated. I didn't plan to show up. I saw you. By accident. By accident. Zoe repeated, shaking her head. Of course. And now that you saw me, you thought you could just walk back into my life like nothing happened? That's not it. Then what is it? John looked into her eyes, searching for a way to speak without making things worse. I saw the boys, Zoe, and I need to know. If they're yours, she finished, her tone sharp. He nodded, not looking away. Zoe laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. And if they are? What are you going to do? Suddenly become a father? Show up with expensive toys and think that fixes everything? No, I just want to. Before he could finish, the door of the yellow house opened and the 3 boys came running out, arguing with each other. I saw it first, shouted Ethan, the boldest of the 3. Liar! I saw it first. Liam pushed his brother lightly. You two are annoying. Mason, the quietest, crossed his arms and stayed behind. Zoe turned to them with a stern look. Boys, what did I say about fighting? They stopped immediately and looked at their mom with exaggerated innocence. Sorry, Mom, they said together, then noticed John's presence. Ethan was the first to recognize him. Hey, it's the man from yesterday. John smiled awkwardly. Hi, guys. The boys came closer, curious, ignoring the tension between the adults. You came back, Liam said, excited. I did. Mason, the most observant, studied John closely. Do you like churros? John blinked, surprised by the question. I do. Why? Because if you like them, you should try Mom's. They're the best in the world. Ethan and Liam nodded immediately. It's true. Nobody makes them better. Zoe tried to intervene. Boys, he doesn't need to. He has to, Mom. Ethan was already pulling John by the hand toward the cart. Come on, come on. John let himself be dragged, unable to resist the boys' enthusiasm. Zoe rolled her eyes but didn't stop them. Ethan grabbed a warm churro and held it out to John. Try it. But be careful, it's hot. John took the churro and took a bite. The taste was exactly how he remembered. Sweet, crispy, with that touch of cinnamon that brought back memories from what felt like another life. He closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them, he saw Zoe watching him in silence. There was something in her eyes, something he couldn't quite read. Maybe surprise, maybe nostalgia. So? Liam asked eagerly. John smiled, genuinely this time. It's the best churro I've ever had. The boys cheered like they had just won a competition. I knew it, Ethan shouted. Mason gave John a light tap on the shoulder. Now you have to come back all the time. The comment caught John off guard. He looked at Zoe, but she quickly turned away, pretending to be busy with the cart. For a brief moment, the air felt lighter. The boys kept chatting excitedly, telling stories about school and how they helped their mom make the churros. John listened closely, smiling at their contagious energy. Zoe watched from a distance, and for the first time since John had reappeared, she felt something different. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't acceptance, but it was something. A spark of what once existed between them. A warmth that time hadn't completely erased, even surrounded by pain and resentment. But before the moment could last, Zoe straightened up and clapped her hands. "All right, boys. That's enough bothering. John, go inside and do your homework." "Ah, Mom," they complained in unison. "No, Mom. Homework, now." The three obeyed reluctantly, but not before waving at John. "Bye, John. Come back soon." He waved back, feeling a tightness in his chest. When they were alone again, the air shifted. Zoe straightened her back and crossed her arms, returning to her guarded stance. "Look, John, I understand that you're curious. I get that you want answers, but here, I'm the one in charge. This is my life, my kids, my routine, and I'm not just going to let you in because you suddenly showed up." John nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. "I understand. I hope so." She took a step back, making it clear the conversation was over. "Now, if you could leave, I'd appreciate it. I've got work to do." John stood there for a few more seconds, torn between his wounded pride and growing regret. Part of him wanted to insist, to argue, to push his way in, but another part, the one finally learning, knew he had to respect her space. "All right," he finally said, "I'll go." He walked a few steps toward the car but stopped and looked back. "Zoe?" She didn't turn around but answered. "What?" "Thank you for the churro." Zoe didn't reply, she just waved her hand dismissively. John returned to the car, where Derek was waiting with a knowing look. "How'd it go?" John got in and shut the door. "Complicated." Derek started the engine. "At least you tried." John stared out the window, watching Zoe continue working as if nothing had happened, but he knew something had changed. That old flame had sparked again, even if it was still surrounded by thorns. And despite everything, he couldn't stop thinking about her, or the boys, or how much he had lost. Back at the office, John tried to focus on the reports stacked on his desk. But the words blurred, and the numbers made no sense. All he could see were Zoe's defiant eyes, the boys' smiles, and the red and white churro cart. He tossed the pen on the desk and rubbed his face with both hands. Derek walked in with a cup of coffee. "Boss, you need to sleep. You look like you were up all night." "I was." Derek set the coffee on the desk and sat across from him. "Let me guess, thinking about her?" John didn't answer, which was answer enough. Derek sighed. "Look, I get that you want to do something. But what's the plan? Because sitting here stewing isn't going to change anything." John turned to the window, staring at the city below. Then an idea began to take shape in his mind. "Derek, you remember the square where she works?" "I do." "Why? It's kind of run down, right? Broken benches, cracked sidewalks, bad lighting." Derek raised an eyebrow. "So?" John turned to him, his eyes bright with a sudden spark. "What if we fix it up?" Derek was quiet for a moment, processing it. "You want to renovate an entire public square?" "Why not? I have the right contacts. I can get it done in a week." Derek shook his head slowly. "Boss, with all due respect, do you really think she's gonna like that?" "Why wouldn't she? The square will look better. It'll be safer for her and the boys." Derek crossed his arms. "Because she'll think you're trying to buy her forgiveness. And honestly, she wouldn't be wrong." John hesitated for a second, then pushed the thought aside. "It's not that, it's just help, nothing more." Derek didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. "All right, but when she finds out and comes here to yell at you, don't say I didn't warn you." In the days that followed, John put his plan into action. He hired a construction crew, provided all the materials, and personally supervised every detail. New benches were installed, the lighting was replaced, the sidewalk was repaired, and even a few trees were planted. The plaza was unrecognizable, clean, organized, safe. John watched everything from a distance, proud of the result. He was sure Zoe would be happy. He couldn't have been more wrong. The next morning, Zoe arrived at the plaza with her churro cart and stopped, confused. She looked around, trying to understand what had happened. Everything was different, better, more beautiful. And she didn't like it one bit. She walked up to one of the workers who was still finishing the final touches. "Excuse me, who ordered all this?" The man looked at her with a friendly smile. "It was sponsored by Baker Enterprises. The boss wanted to make the plaza prettier." Zoe felt her blood boil. "Baker Enterprises? That's right. John Baker personally supervised everything." "Ruth?" Zoe took a deep breath, trying to control the anger growing inside her. Without another word, she went back to the cart, grabbed her bag, and called Claire, who was helping with the kids. "Claire, can you stay with the boys for an hour?" "Of course." "Why?" Zoe was already grabbing her car keys. "Because I'm about to kill a businessman." 30 minutes later, Zoe stormed into the Baker Enterprises building like a hurricane. The receptionist tried to stop her, but Zoe just walked right past. "Ma'am, you can't go up without authorization. Watch me." Zoe stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the top floor. When the doors opened, she marched down the hallway toward John's office, ignoring the curious stares from employees. She pushed the door open hard, making it slam against the wall. John was in a meeting with 3 executives, all of them turning in shock to see who had entered like that. Zoe pointed her finger straight at him. "You, with me, now." John went pale. "Zoe, I'm in a meeting. I don't care if you're negotiating world peace. Get out of that chair and come here." The executives glanced at each other, unsure of what to do. Derek, leaning against the wall, muttered under his breath, "I warned you." John stood up, trying to keep his composure. "Everyone, let's take a 15-minute break." The executives quickly left, relieved to escape the situation. Derek was the last to leave, closing the door behind him, after giving John a good luck look. Zoe crossed her arms and glared at John with a mix of fury and disappointment. "What did you do?" John tried to sound calm. "I renovated the plaza. I thought you'd like it." "Like it?" Zoe laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You thought I'd like being treated like charity?" "It wasn't charity. It was just what? A good deed? A way to ease your conscience?" John took a step forward. "Zoe, I just wanted to help." "Help?" She stepped closer too, still pointing her finger at him. "You want to help? Then respect me. I don't need your charity, John. I need respect." Her voice echoed through the room. John stayed silent, not knowing what to say. Zoe continued, relentless. "You think that because you have money you can fix everything? You think you can just walk back into my life, fix up a plaza, and that will erase 7 years of absence? That's not it." "Then what is it?" John hesitated. "I just wanted to do something good for you." Zoe shook her head in disbelief. "You don't get it, do you?" "You never did. I don't need you to do something good for me. I need you to see me, to respect me, to understand that I built my life without you." John lowered his head. "I know." "You know?" Zoe let out a bitter laugh. "No, John, you don't know, because if you did, you wouldn't have done this." She took another step toward him, and her words came out like a final verdict. "Money fixes plazas, not hearts." The silence that followed was crushing. John felt every word like a punch. She was right. He had tried to use what he had, money and influence, to make up for what he lacked, humility and understanding. Zoe turned to leave, but before opening the door, she looked back. "Let me give you some advice, John. If you really want to be part of my life, or the boys', you'll have to learn it's not about what you can buy. It's about who you can be." With that, she walked out, slamming the door behind her. John stood there in the middle of the room, alone. Slowly, he sat down in the chair and buried his hands in his head. A few minutes later, Derek quietly stepped back in. "So, was it as bad as I imagined?" John didn't respond. He just kept looking at the door where Zoe had left. Derek walked closer and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Look, boss, I know you wanted to do the right thing, but maybe what's right isn't exactly what you think it is." John slowly nodded. For the first time in his life, he realized that all his success, all his money, all his power, meant nothing if he didn't know how to use it the right way. Helping wasn't about paying for renovations. Helping was about being present. And for the first time, John Baker began to understand the true meaning of humility. In the days that followed, John kept his distance. He didn't go back to the plaza, didn't try to reach out. He just watched from afar, thinking about everything Zoe had said. Derek noticed the change but didn't say a word. Meanwhile, Ethan, Mason, and Liam had become obsessed with the churro man, as they started calling John. They talked about him all the time, asking questions that made Zoe uneasy. "Mom, why doesn't John come back anymore?" Ethan asked one afternoon while they were helping make the dough. Zoe rolled her eyes, "Because he has more important things to do." "More important than churros?" Mason looked genuinely offended. "Much more important, sweetheart." Liam, the most observant of the three, tilted his head. "But he seems to like you, Mom." Zoe almost dropped the bowl. What? Where did you get that from? The way he looks at you. Liam answered like it was obvious. Just like the prince looks at the princess in the movie. Zoe let out a nervous laugh. You watched too many cartoons. The boys exchanged knowing looks but didn't say anything else, at least not in front of her. The next day, the plaza was busier than usual. Zoe served customers while the boys played nearby, always under her watchful eye. But in a brief moment of distraction, when she turned to grab more sugar, Liam disappeared. It only took a few minutes for Zoe to notice. Ethan, where's Liam? Ethan and Mason looked around, confused. He was just here. Zoe's heart pounded. She dropped everything and began to search, shouting her son's name. Liam! Liam, where are you? The other two joined the search, calling for their brother. Panic grew inside her with each second. Across the plaza, John was driving by when he saw the commotion. He recognized Zoe right away. She was clearly desperate. He told Derek to stop and got out of the car quickly. That's when he heard a quiet sob coming from behind one of the newly planted trees. He approached and found Liam curled up, tears streaming down his face. Hey, it's okay. John knelt beside the boy. What happened? Liam sniffled. I got lost. I can't find Mom. Your mom's looking for you. Come on, I'll take you to her. John picked the boy up. Liam clung to him like a lifeline. When they reached the cart, Zoe saw them and ran toward them. Liam. John set the boy down and Zoe pulled him into a tight hug, covering his face with kisses. Don't ever do that again. Do you hear me? Never again. Liam cried but nodded. I'm sorry, Mom. Zoe lifted her eyes and saw John standing there, quietly watching. For a moment, the anger she felt was replaced by something else. Gratitude. Thank you, she said, her voice still shaky. John nodded. You're welcome. I'm just glad he's okay. The boys rushed to hug their brother. Ethan looked up at John with admiration. You're like a superhero. John laughed. Not exactly. Yes, you are. Mason insisted. You saved Liam. Zoe shook her head, but a small smile slipped through. John noticed and felt something warm in his chest. From that day on, the boys began treating John like he was part of their lives, and without anyone realizing it, they started plotting. The next afternoon, John showed up at the plaza. Zoe saw him approaching and crossed her arms. Let me guess. You came to buy churros? Actually, yes. She raised an eyebrow but served him anyway. When the boys saw him, they ran straight to the cart. John, you came back. I did. I came for more of those amazing churros. Ethan nudged Mason, who winked back. Clearly, they were up to something. You know, John, Ethan began with exaggerated innocence. Mom makes the best churros because she puts love in them. Zoe rolled her eyes. Ethan, stop. It's true, Mason agreed. She says food made with love tastes better. John smiled. So, that's why they're so good. Zoe felt her cheeks warm but turned away, pretending to focus on frying more churros. Liam, not wanting to be left out, pointed at John. Mom, can John have dinner with us tonight? Zoe almost let the churros burn. Liam, that's not how it works. Why not? The boy asked, genuinely confused. You always say friends are welcome. He's not. Zoe stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. John waited, curious to hear what she would say. He's not what, Mom? Ethan nudged. Zoe sighed. He doesn't live nearby. He has better things to do. John took a step forward. Actually, I'd love to have dinner with you, if it's not a problem. The boys cheered like they had just won the lottery. Zoe looked at John with a mix of irritation and resignation. You know they're going to ask you a million questions, right? I'm ready. She shook her head but couldn't hide the small smile that tried to appear. That night, John had dinner with Zoe and the boys in the small yellow house. The table was filled with laughter, stories, and churros. Because according to the boys, every meal was better with churros. The boys did exactly what Zoe had warned. They bombarded John with questions. About work, about cars, about why he wore a tie. John answered everything with patience and good humor. At one point, Ethan grabbed some sugar and drew a heart on the table. Mason and Liam laughed, trying to hide it. Zoe noticed, but pretended not to. John saw it too and smiled to himself. When the night ended, the boys were already dozing off on the couch. Zoe carried them to their room one by one while John waited in the living room. When she came back, she found him looking at the photos on the wall. Pictures of the boys, happy moments, a life built with love and effort. You did an amazing job with them, John said sincerely. Zoe crossed her arms, but her tone was softer now. Thank you. I mean it, Zoe. They're special. She nodded, glancing toward the hallway where the boys were sleeping. They're my life. John turned to her. I'm sorry for not being here, for not knowing. Zoe looked at him for a long moment. You couldn't have known. I never told you. But I should have come back. I should have looked for you. She shrugged. There's no point thinking about what should have happened. Life is what it is. John took a step toward her. And now? What happens now? Zoe hesitated. Part of her wanted to send him away, to protect herself and the boys. But another part, smaller and more fragile, wanted to give it a chance. Now? She repeated. Now you leave, and tomorrow you come back to buy more churros. Like a regular customer. John smiled. Just a customer? Zoe rolled her eyes, but the sparkle in them betrayed that something was shifting. Don't get used to it, Baker. I'm still mad at you. I completely understand. She walked him to the door. Before leaving, John stopped. Thank you. For dinner. For the chance. Zoe didn't answer, just nodded. But when she closed the door, she leaned against it and smiled. The boys were right. Maybe there was something there. Something small, fragile, but real. And for the first time in a long time, Zoe Cooper allowed herself to believe that maybe the past could be left behind. Maybe. The next afternoon, the Los Angeles sky darkened quickly. Heavy clouds formed, and soon the rain began to pour hard. Zoe had to pack up the cart early and return home soaked, with the boys running ahead, laughing and jumping in puddles. Inside the house, she made hot chocolate for the three of them while they changed clothes. The rain tapped on the roof, creating a steady, comforting rhythm. Zoe was lost in thought when the phone rang. It was John. It was John. Are you all okay? I saw the rain got heavy. She smiled without meaning to. We're fine. The boys loved the rain, of course. Of course. He hesitated. Can I stop by? I brought something for them. Zoe sighed. John, you don't have to keep bringing things. I know, but I want to. She looked out the window, watching the rain fall. All right, but don't stay too long, okay? I've got things to do. I'm already on my way. 20 minutes later, John arrived with a bag full of children's books and a few board games. The boys welcomed him with excitement, jumping around and asking 1,000 questions at once. Zoe watched from the kitchen, a cup of coffee in her hands. There was something different in the way John interacted with the boys now, more natural, more present. After a while, the boys were busy with their new games, and John walked over to Zoe in the kitchen. I need to talk to you. The serious tone gave him away. Zoe set her cup in the sink and crossed her arms. About what? John looked at the boys playing in the living room, then back at her. About them, about the truth. Zoe felt her heart race. She knew this moment would come. She always knew. She just hadn't expected it so soon. Let's go outside, she said, grabbing a jacket. They stepped out onto the small covered porch behind the house. The rain was heavy, but they were sheltered. Zoe leaned against the railing, looking out at the soaked yard. John waited. He didn't want to pressure her, but he needed to know. After a long silence, Zoe finally spoke. They're yours. The words came out simple, direct, without hesitation. John felt his legs go weak. Deep down, he had always known. But hearing the confirmation was different. Zoe? Let me finish. She raised her hand, still not looking at him. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you left. I was in shock. I thought about telling you, but you had already made it clear you didn't want anything else with me, that you'd chosen another life. John opened his mouth to respond, but she kept going. I only told Claire, no one else. I decided to raise the boys on my own. I didn't want your pity. I didn't want your money. I wanted to prove I could do it. Her voice wavered at the end, but she quickly pulled herself together. John took a step forward, but didn't get too close. Why didn't you look for me? Why didn't you give me the chance to be there? Zoe finally turned to face him. There were tears in her eyes, but also strength. Because you had already made your choice, John, and I made mine. He shook his head, feeling the weight of guilt growing inside him. I would have come back, if I had known. Would you? Zoe interrupted. Would you really? Or would you have felt trapped? Obligated? I didn't want you to come back because of responsibility. I wanted you to come back because you loved me, because you wanted to be with me. John stayed silent. He had no answer, because he knew she was right. Zoe wiped her tears with the back of her hand and let out a long sigh. I raised 3 kids on my own, John. 3. Do you know what that was like? Working all day, taking care of them at night, waking up at dawn when one of them had a nightmare, juggling bills at the end of the month. She stopped, her voice breaking. But I did it. I did it without you. John felt every word like a blade. He wanted to step closer, hold her, beg for forgiveness if that's what it took. But when he moved forward, she lifted her hand. Don't look at me like that. Don't look at me with pity. I made it without you. I know, he said, his voice rough. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for not being here, for not knowing, for being a coward. Zoe looked at him, and for the first time since he reappeared, there was something different in her eyes. Not anger, not hurt, just exhaustion. A deep exhaustion from carrying the world on her shoulders for years. I don't regret it, she said more to herself than to him. I love my children. Every second of pain was worth it. But it was hard, John. It was really hard. John took another step, and this time she didn't stop him. I want to fix this. I want to be present. I want to be the father they deserve. And He hesitated. I want to try again, with you. Zoe shook her head, but there was no anger now, only tiredness. It's not that simple, I know. But I want to try. Let me prove I've changed. She looked at him for a long moment, trying to see if he was being honest or just saying what she wanted to hear. You ran away from what really mattered, John. You ran from me, from what we had. You chose money, success, power, and now you want to come back because you found out you have kids? It's not just because of the boys, he said, his voice steady. It's because of you. It's always been you. I was just too stupid to realize it. Zoe let out a humorless laugh. You really were. I was, he admitted. But I'm not anymore, or at least I'm trying not to be. She crossed her arms, shielding herself. And what do you want from me, John? You want me to forget everything? Pretend the last 7 years never happened? No. I want you to give me a chance to prove I can be better, that I can be the man you deserve, the man the boys deserve. Zoe stayed silent, looking out at the rain. The conversation had been raw, full of painful truths that needed to be said. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive him. She didn't know if she ever would be. But she knew he was trying, and maybe that was enough. For now. I'm not going to make this easy for you, she said at last. If you want to be part of our lives, you're going to have to prove it. Not with money, not with gifts, with presents. John nodded. I understand. And the boys, they'll need to know the truth, that you're their father. When you think the time is right, I'll be ready. Zoe looked at him, and for the first time, she saw something beyond the arrogant businessman who left years ago. She saw a broken man, full of regret, willing to change. She didn't know if it was enough, but it was a start. Then prove it, she said simply. John nodded, feeling the weight of that challenge. But he was ready. For the first time in years, he knew exactly what he needed to do. It wouldn't be easy. Winning Zoe back, earning the boys' trust, proving he wasn't the man who once ran away from what truly mattered. But he would do it. Somehow, he would. Because now he knew that everything he had built, the buildings, the money, the success, meant nothing without them. When they went back inside, the boys were scattered around the living room, playing with their new games. They looked up at the two adults, sensing that something had changed, though they didn't understand what. Are you okay, Mom? Liam asked, always the most sensitive. Zoe smiled and ruffled his hair. I'm fine, sweetheart. John watched the scene, and something warm spread inside him. This was real. This was what truly mattered, and he wasn't going to run away again. Not this time. The next morning, John woke up with a clear purpose. He wouldn't go back to the office. He wouldn't take business calls. Today, and for the next few days, his priority would be something else. Derek found him in the garage, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt instead of his usual suit. Boss, are you okay? I've never seen you without a tie on a weekday. John smiled. Better than ever. Let's go. Where to? To Zoe's neighborhood. I've got work to do. Derek raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He grabbed the keys and they headed out. When they arrived, Zoe was setting up the churro cart like she did every morning. As she saw John getting out of the car with a toolbox in hand, she froze and put her hands on her hips. What are you doing? John lifted the box. Came to fix the cart's wheel. I noticed it's a little crooked. Zoe blinked, surprised. You? Fix it? Yes, me. Why? You think I don't know how to use a screwdriver? She laughed. Honestly, no. John pretended to be offended. Hey, I can do more than sign checks, you know? Then prove it. He knelt beside the cart and started examining the wheel. Zoe stood there with her arms crossed, clearly doubting he'd be able to do anything useful. 15 minutes later, John stood up, sweaty but smiling. Done. Try it. Zoe pushed the cart, and to her surprise, the wheel moved smoothly. No more annoying squeak. Well, it's not terrible, John laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. The boys, who had been watching from the porch, ran over to them. You fixed it, Ethan shouted, amazed. Now the cart's perfect, Mason added. Liam looked up at John with admiration. You're good at this. John knelt down to their level. I learned to fix things when I was a kid. My dad had a repair shop. Zoe raised her eyebrows. It was the first time he had shared something personal from his past. I didn't know that, John shrugged. There's a lot you don't know about me. Just like there's a lot I don't know about you, but I want to change that. She stared at him for a moment, unsure what to say. Then she looked away. Well, thanks for the fix. I need to work now. Can I help? John? Please, just today. Let me help. Zoe sighed, but agreed. John spent the whole day by her side, helping serve churros, chatting with customers, playing with the boys. It was strange seeing a man who used to wear expensive suits, well, ex-suits, since now he wore simple clothes, serving sweets in a small square. But it also felt good. In the days that followed, John kept showing up. He fixed little things around the neighborhood, helped neighbors with repairs, carried groceries for the elderly lady on the corner. Zoe watched all of it suspiciously at first, thinking it was just a phase, a temporary way to impress her. But John didn't stop. One afternoon, while Zoe was counting the day's earnings, she noticed something odd. There was more money than there should have been. A lot more. She frowned and went to find John, who was helping the boys with their homework in the living room. John, come here for a second. He stood and walked to the kitchen. What's wrong? Zoe held up the envelope with the cash. This. What did you do? John tried to look innocent. I don't know what you're talking about. John Baker, don't lie to me. Where did this extra money come from? He sighed. I paid the boys' school fees. It was overdue, and I just what? Zoe interrupted, her voice rising. You decided to pay without telling me? You wouldn't have let me if I'd asked. Exactly, because I don't need you to. Zoe, they're my kids too, John interrupted gently but firmly. Let me help, please. She went quiet, torn between anger and relief. She was too proud to admit it, but that bill had been keeping her up at night for weeks. Next time, tell me first, she finally said. Deal? John smiled. Deal. Later, as John sat in the living room, Mason approached him with a mischievous grin. Can I ask you something? Of course. The boy tilted his head. Do you like Mom? John almost choked on the water he was drinking. What? Do you like Mom? Mason repeated like it was the most obvious thing in the world. From the kitchen, Zoe heard the question and froze, listening closely. John looked at the boy and decided to be honest. I do, very much. Mason's smile grew even bigger. I knew it. Ethan thinks so too, and Liam said you look at her the way the prince looks at Cinderella. John laughed. You three are very observant. We pay attention, Mason said proudly. So, are you going to marry her? This time, it was Zoe who nearly dropped the plate she was washing. John took a deep breath. Well, that depends on her. Mason nodded, satisfied, and went back to play with his brothers. John looked toward the kitchen and saw Zoe pretending she hadn't heard anything, but her cheeks were flushed. He smiled to himself. That night, after the boys were asleep, Zoe and John sat on the porch, looking up at the stars. There was a quiet, comfortable silence between them, something they hadn't felt in a very long time. You've changed, Zoe said, breaking the silence. John turned to her. For the better, I hope. Yes, she hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready to trust you completely yet, but it's better. That's something already. She gave him a small smile. Yes, it is. John was about to say something when his phone rang. He looked at the screen and saw it was his mother. He ignored the call. Aren't you going to answer? Zoe asked. It's not important. The phone rang again and again, until John, annoyed, finally answered. Hello? His mother's voice came through loud enough for Zoe to hear. John, I need to talk to you, now. Mom, I'm busy. Busy with that woman? John, you're making a fool of yourself. Everyone's talking. John closed his eyes, trying to stay calm. Mom, it's not like that. Of course it is. You abandoned the company. You're living in a poor neighborhood, taking care of children that aren't even. Mom, John interrupted, his voice firm. Stop. Now. There was silence on the other end. I didn't abandon anything. I'm taking care of my family, and those children are my sons. Your grandsons. John, and if you or anyone else in the family has a problem with that, then it's your problem, not mine. He hung up and looked at Zoe, who had been quietly watching the whole thing. I'm sorry about that. She shook her head. Your family doesn't approve. No, but I don't care. Zoe studied him for a moment. Are you sure? Because this could make things harder for you. John took a step toward her. Zoe, for the first time in my life, I feel truly human. I'm not just a businessman. I'm not just a name on a building. I'm a father. He hesitated. I'm someone who wants to be here, with you, with them. Zoe felt something shift inside her chest. It wasn't full forgiveness, not yet, but it was close. Okay, she said simply. John smiled, and in that moment, he knew he was on the right path. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he was following his heart. And that made all the difference. A few days later, Zoe was setting up her cart for another workday when two men in uniform approached. One carried a clipboard, the other a camera. Good morning, Zoe Cooper? She looked at them cautiously. That's me. Can I help you? The man with the clipboard showed his badge. Los Angeles Department of Public Health. We're doing a routine inspection of all street vendors in the area. Zoe's heart raced, but she kept her composure. Of course. Go ahead. The inspectors began checking everything. They wrote notes on the clipboard, took pictures, asked questions. Zoe answered calmly, but inside she was nervous. After 15 minutes, the lead inspector turned to her with a serious expression. Mrs. Cooper, we found some irregularities. Zoe felt her knees weaken. What kind of irregularities? The cart doesn't have an updated health inspection certificate. There's no documentation for the ingredient sources, and the street vendor license expired 3 months ago. But I paid for the license. You paid the city fee, but you didn't renew the state license. They're different things. The other inspector handed her a piece of paper. Here's the list of requirements. You have 15 days to get everything in order, or the cart will be confiscated. Zoe took the paper with shaking hands. She looked at the list and felt her world collapse. There were dozens of items, each with its own fee and paperwork. How much will all of this cost? The inspector calculated quickly. Between fees, certificates, and documentation, I'd say around $1,500, maybe $2,000. Zoe swallowed hard. That was almost everything she had saved in recent months. The inspectors left, and she stood there, staring at the paper. Claire, who had watched everything from a distance, walked over. Zoe, are you okay? No, I'm not. Claire glanced at the list. Oh my God, that's a lot. I know. Zoe sat on the nearest bench, feeling defeated. I don't know if I can handle all this alone. Claire hesitated. You could ask John for help. Zoe shook her head right away. No, I'm not asking him for money. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about help. He knows people. He knows how to deal with bureaucracy. Claire, Zoe, put your pride aside for a second. This isn't about you. It's about protecting your livelihood, your work. Think about the boys. Zoe stayed quiet, knowing her friend was right. But the idea of asking John for help hurt more than it should. That night, after a lot of thinking, Zoe finally called him. Her voice was tired. Zoe? It's so good to hear you. Are you okay? Not really. I need help. There was a short pause on the other end. Whatever it is, I'll help. What happened? She told him about the inspection, the requirements, and the tight deadline. John listened in silence. Tomorrow morning I'll pick you up. We'll fix this together. Zoe felt a relief she didn't want to admit. Thank you. The next morning John arrived early. Zoe was ready, holding the list of requirements. The boys stayed with Claire. Ready? He asked. Ready. But I should warn you, it's going to be a long day. I'm prepared, and long it was. They spent the entire day going from one public office to another. Health department, city hall, state revenue. Every place had a huge line, unfriendly staff, and more paperwork than anyone should ever have to deal with. By the third line of the day, Zoe was about to lose her patience. This is ridiculous. Why do we need 3 different stamps for the same thing? John held back a laugh. Bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is just a fancy word for legal torture. He laughed, and so did she, despite everything. At one of the counters, the clerk was particularly difficult. This form is filled out incorrectly. Zoe looked at the paper. Where? Here. You printed in block letters. It has to be cursive. Zoe blinked, stunned. You're joking, right? Those are the rules. John leaned forward. With all due respect, that's not written anywhere on the form. It's implied. Implied. Zoe repeated, her voice rising. Since when is a rule implied? The clerk crossed his arms. If you don't want to fill it out correctly, you can come back another day. John placed a hand on Zoe's arm, realizing she was about to explode. Let's step outside. Take a breath. Zoe followed him, fuming. That man is driving me crazy. I know, but losing your temper won't help. She glared at him. So what do you suggest? John smiled. Let me handle it. They went back to the counter, and John took over the conversation. With calm patience and a diplomatic tone that even impressed Zoe, he convinced the clerk to accept the form. When they walked out, Zoe shook her head. How did you do that? Years of negotiating with difficult people. You learn to pick your battles. She rolled her eyes but smiled. By the end of the day, after 7 hours of lines, documents, and setbacks, they finally got everything approved. Every paper stamped, every fee paid, every requirement met. Zoe held the folder with all the documents like it was a treasure. We did it, John smiled. We did. She looked at him, and for the first time since he'd reappeared in her life, she felt something different. It wasn't full forgiveness, it wasn't blind trust, but it was gratitude. And maybe something more. Thank you. Really. I couldn't have done this alone. You could have, he said honestly. But you didn't have to. Not anymore. Zoe hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged him quickly. It was a brief, almost awkward hug, but it meant everything. When she stepped back, her cheeks were red. This time, you helped the right way. John smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest. Good to know. On the way back, they talked about everything and nothing. They laughed about the day's mishaps, complained about the clerks, and made plans to avoid future problems. It felt strange, but also good. Natural. As if the years apart were slowly fading, replaced by something steadier. When they got to Zoe's house, the boys ran to meet them. Mom, did you get it? Zoe lifted the folder. We got it. The three of them cheered as if they'd just won the lottery. John watched with a smile on his face. Claire came closer. So? How did it go? Zoe looked at John, then back at her friend. It was good. He was good. Claire smiled but didn't say anything. Later, when John was leaving, Zoe walked him to the car. John? He turned. Yes? Thank you, again, for being here, for not giving up. He took a step toward her. I'll never give up, Zoe. Not on you, not on the boys. She held his gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them. It wasn't love yet, but it was the beginning of something, a bond. And for the first time, Zoe allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the past could be left behind, and the future could be built together. A few days later, John was at the office when he got an idea. He picked up the phone and called Zoe. Hi, are you busy? Always, she replied, but there was a lightness in her voice. Why? There's a street festival this weekend, music and food festival at Venice Beach. I thought you and the boys might like it. Zoe hesitated. John, I don't know. It'll be fun. Live music, food, games for the kids, and before you ask, no, it's not expensive. It's public. She laughed. You're learning. I'm trying. So, what do you say? Zoe looked at the boys playing in the living room and sighed. All right, but if you show up in a suit, I'll kill you. John laughed. I promise I won't. On Saturday, John showed up wearing jeans, a simple t-shirt, and sneakers. Zoe approved with a nod. Much better. The boys practically jumped on him. John, you're coming with us. I sure am. Ready to go? Yes. They all left together in John's car. Derek was driving, smiling as he watched the family-like scene unfold. When they arrived at the festival, the place was packed. Food stalls were everywhere, a live stage played Latin music, and the air was filled with a festive vibe. The boys ran ahead, amazed by everything. Zoe followed them, trying to keep them in check. Ethan, don't run so fast. Mason, hold Liam's hand. John walked beside her, smiling. They have a lot of energy. You have no idea, Zoe replied, smiling too. They stopped at a churro stand, and Zoe couldn't resist. Let's see if these are as good as mine. They bought some and handed them to the boys. Ethan took a bite and made a dramatic face. These aren't as good as yours, Mom, Zoe laughed, pleased. Obviously. John tried one and agreed. He's right, yours are much better. Zoe looked at him, surprised. Are you flattering me? I'm being honest. She shook her head, but her cheeks turned pink. Later, when the music picked up, people started dancing. A group of professional dancers got on stage, performing salsa with contagious energy. Mason grabbed Zoe's hand. "Mom, let's dance." She tried to resist. "Sweetie, I don't know how to dance salsa, but you do dance. You always dance at home." John raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" Zoe turned red. "Only when I'm alone." The boys didn't accept excuses. They pulled Zoe onto the dance floor and she gave in. She started dancing with the boys, spinning them around and laughing as they stepped on her feet. John watched from a distance, captivated. There was something in the way she laughed, the way she let go, that left him speechless. Derek nudged him. "Go on, boss, dance with her." "I can't dance." "Even better. It'll be funny." John rolled his eyes but walked closer. Zoe saw him coming and shook her head. "Don't even think about it. Come on, just one dance." "John, you don't know salsa." "And you do?" "More or less." He held out his hand. "Then teach me." Zoe hesitated, but the boys were already encouraging her. "Go, Mom." She rolled her eyes and took his hand. "But if you step on my foot, I'm leaving." John laughed. "I'll try not to." They started dancing, and as expected, John was completely clumsy. He stepped on her foot twice in the first 10 seconds. "John, sorry." Zoe laughed, and despite his lack of coordination, they kept going. The boys danced around them, laughing and doing their own salsa moves. In a moment of distraction, Ethan bumped into Liam, who bumped into Mason, and all three fell onto a table full of churros. The pastries flew everywhere, and the boys were covered in sugar and cinnamon. Zoe rushed over. "Oh my God, are you okay?" The three started laughing, completely covered in churros. "We're covered in churros!" John couldn't stop laughing. Zoe tried to stay serious, but she laughed too. "You're impossible." The owner of the stall came over, but instead of getting angry, he laughed too. It's okay. Accidents happen." John paid for the ruined churros and helped clean up the boys. Zoe shook her head but was smiling. Never a dull moment with you three. When the mess was over, they sat on the grass near the stage. The boys played with a ball John had bought. And Zoe watched them with a soft look in her eyes. John sat down beside her. "Thanks for coming." She looked at him. "Thanks for inviting us." There was a comfortable silence between them. Then John took a deep breath. "Zoe, there's something I need to say." She turned to him, curious. "What?" He looked at the boys, laughing and running around. "I spent years thinking success meant money, power, building towers, but I was wrong. Real success is this." He pointed to the boys. "It's being with the people you love. It's laughing, even when things go wrong. It's being present." Zoe felt her eyes fill with tears, but she blinked quickly. "John, let me finish." He took her hand. "I know I ruined everything. I know I hurt you, but I want to make it right. I want to be here, for them, for you." Zoe stayed silent, processing his words. Then she looked at the boys. "They asked about you the other day." "What did they ask?" "If you were going to stay, if you were their dad." John felt his chest tighten. "And what did you say?" "That we'd talk about it." She turned back to him. "Maybe it's time to tell them the truth." John nodded, nervous but ready. Zoe called the boys, and they came running. "Sit here. Mommy and John need to talk to you." The three boys sat down, curious. Zoe looked at John, and he nodded, giving her strength. "Boys, you know John and I have known each other for a long time, right?" They all nodded. "Well, we were married. Before you were born." Ethan frowned. "Married?" "Yes. And—" Zoe took a deep breath. "John is your father." There was a moment of silence. The boys looked at John, then at Zoe, then back at John. Mason was the first to speak. "Like, our real dad?" John nodded, his eyes wet. "Yes, it's me." Liam tilted his head. "Then why weren't you here before?" The question was simple, but it hurt. John knelt down to their level. "Because I made a very big mistake. I left when I shouldn't have. But I'm here now, and I promise I'm never leaving again." Ethan took a step forward. "Are you going to live with us?" John glanced at Zoe, who looked away. "That we'll talk about, but I'll always be around, always." The boys exchanged looks. Then, to John's surprise, Ethan stepped forward and hugged him. Mason and Liam followed, and all three wrapped their arms around him tightly. John closed his eyes, feeling tears streaming down his face. Zoe was crying too, but she was smiling at the same time. When they pulled away, Mason asked softly, "Can I call you Dad?" John choked up. "Yes, please do." The three smiled and went back to playing, as if that revelation had been the most natural thing in the world. John looked at Zoe, who wiped away her tears. Thank you. They deserved to know. Later that night, the festival lights lit up in every color. Fireworks exploded in the sky, illuminating everything. The boys watched in awe. John and Zoe stood side by side, quietly observing. Slowly, John took her hand. Zoe looked down at their fingers intertwined. She didn't pull her hand away. He turned to her. Can I try again? Zoe looked at him. There was fear in her eyes, but also hope. Try what? Us. You and me. A real family. She hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to protect herself, to avoid more pain. But another part, stronger and braver, wanted to believe. I don't know if I'm ready, she said honestly. That's okay. I'll wait, as long as it takes. Zoe looked at the boys, at the fireworks, at the man standing next to her. And for the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to dream of a different future. A soft smile appeared on her face. Okay, let's try. John smiled, and it felt like the whole world lit up. That night, under the festival lights and the glow of fireworks, something was reborn between them. It wasn't the perfect love they once had. It was something better. It was real, imperfect, honest. And for the first time, they both believed that maybe, just maybe, love could have a second chance. Weeks later, John's routine had changed completely. He spent his mornings at the office, but his afternoons were dedicated to Zoe and the boys. He helped with the churro cart, took the kids to school, and had dinner with them almost every night. It was a different life. Simpler, happier. But it wasn't without problems. One Tuesday morning, John arrived at the office and found Derek with a worried look. Boss, we've got a problem. John took off his coat. What kind of problem? Derek handed him a tablet showing an online article. The headline read, Businessman John Baker accused of fraud in real estate project. John felt his stomach twist. What is this? An ex-business partner is accusing you of embezzling funds from a project 3 years ago. She gave an interview to a major newspaper. John quickly read the article. It was all lies. He had left that project because he suspected irregularities. Now he was being accused of being the one responsible. This is ridiculous. I have documents that prove I'm innocent. I know. But you know how the internet works. People believe first and check later. John ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. In just a few hours, the news had spread everywhere. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Clients canceling contracts, partners demanding explanations, the media asking for statements. It was a nightmare. Zoe saw the news while preparing churros. Claire called, worried. Did you see? I saw. Zoe's voice was tense. So, do you believe it? Zoe stayed silent for a moment. 3 months ago, she would have believed it without hesitation. John was ambitious, obsessed with success. Of course, it could have been true. But now, after seeing him with the boys, witnessing his change, feeling the sincerity in every gesture? No, she said firmly. I don't believe it. Are you sure? Absolutely. That afternoon, a crew from a local TV station showed up at the square where Zoe worked. A reporter approached her with a microphone. Mrs. Cooper, can we talk to you for a minute? Zoe looked at the camera, cautious. About what? About John Baker. We know you have a relationship with him. Zoe crossed her arms. And? We'd like your opinion on the accusations. Zoe hesitated. She could easily send the reporter away. She didn't owe anyone anything. But then she thought about John, about how much he had changed, about how hard he had been trying. You can record, she said. The reporter turned on the camera, and Zoe looked straight into the lens. My name is Zoe Cooper, and yes, I know John Baker. I've known him for many years, and I can say with complete certainty that these accusations are lies. The reporter blinked, surprised by her directness. How can you be so sure? Because I know him. I know the man he was and the man he's become. John Baker may have made mistakes in the past, but fraud, dishonesty, that's not who he is. But the evidence. What evidence? Zoe cut her off. One person accusing him with no proof? That's not evidence. That's slander. And honestly, you should be ashamed of spreading that without checking the facts first. The reporter opened her mouth, but Zoe kept going. John Baker is a good man. He's a devoted father. And if someone's trying to destroy his reputation, it's because they have something to gain from it. Think about that before ruining someone's life. With that, she turned and went back to the churro cart, leaving the reporter speechless. The interview aired that same night. Within hours, it went viral. Zoe's honest words got people's attention. People began questioning the accusations. Journalists dug deeper and uncovered that John's ex-partner had a history of fraudulent lawsuits. In just 2 days, the narrative changed completely. John was publicly cleared, and the woman who accused him was exposed as the real criminal. John watched Zoe's interview at least 10 times. Each time, his chest tightened with emotion. She had defended him, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. That night, he went to her house. Zoe was in the kitchen washing dishes when she heard the door close. "I forgot to lock it," she muttered. She turned and saw John standing in the doorway, looking at her with an intensity that left her speechless. "John? What?" He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, held her face in his hands, and kissed her. It was a kiss full of gratitude, emotion, everything he couldn't say in words. Zoe was surprised at first, then she relaxed and kissed him back. When they pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you for believing in me." Zoe smiled, wiping away her tears. "I just told the truth. You saved me." "No," she corrected. "You saved yourself. I just made sure everyone saw what I already knew." He pulled her into a hug, and they stood there in the kitchen, just holding each other. A few days later, John invited Zoe for a drive. He said he had something to show her. "Another surprise?" she asked, suspicious. "A good one, I promise." They drove to a nearby neighborhood, and John stopped in front of a small but charming building. It had a brick facade and large glass windows. "What is this?" Zoe asked. John got out of the car and led her to the door. There was a sign covered with a cloth. "Close your eyes," he said. Zoe rolled her eyes but obeyed. John pulled off the cloth, and when she opened her eyes, she saw the illuminated sign, the triplets, confectionery and churros. Zoe froze. What is this?" John smiled. "A bakery. Our bakery. Or, if you want it." He turned to her. "I thought a lot about what I want to do with my life, Zoe, and I realized I don't want to build skyscrapers anymore. I want to build something that matters, something that brings us together, something for the boys." Zoe looked at the sign, moved, the triplets, in honor of them, and this new chapter of our lives. She walked inside. The space was empty but full of possibilities. There was a big counter, a fully equipped kitchen, and tables spread out. "John, this is amazing, but it must have cost a fortune." "It doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is that this is ours. It's not charity. It's not me trying to buy your forgiveness. It's a new beginning, together." Tears rolled down Zoe's face. For the first time, she felt he wasn't trying to fix the past with money. He was living the present by her side. "I don't know what to say." John took her hand. "Say you're in." She looked around, imagining the place alive. Fresh churros, cupcakes, homemade bread, the boys helping after school, a family working together. "I'm in." John pulled her into a hug, and there, in the middle of that empty space, they began to plan their future. In the weeks that followed, they worked together to open the bakery. Zoe handled the recipes, John took care of the administrative side. The boys helped decorate, picking colors and drawing on the walls. Derek also pitched in, bringing furniture and organizing the kitchen. Claire came by and was impressed. "Zoe, this looks incredible." "I know," Zoe said with a smile. "I still can't believe it's real." "Believe it. You deserve it." Working side by side brought Zoe and John even closer. They argued over silly details, like curtain colors or which flour to use, but always ended up laughing. The boys loved every second. Ethan called himself the assistant chef. Mason was the quality inspector, and Liam proudly became the decoration manager. One night, after everyone had gone home, John and Zoe stayed behind at the bakery. She was cleaning the counter while he straightened the chairs. "Thank you," she said suddenly. He stopped. "For what?" "For this. For everything. For not giving up." John walked toward her. "I'll never give up on you, Zoe, or on us." She smiled, and in that moment she realized their love wasn't the same as years ago. It was better. It was mature, steady, real. And for the first time, Zoe Cooper truly believed that the future'd be different. A future built not with money or empty promises, but with presence, work, and love. And that was more than enough. A month later, the bakery was in full swing. The triplets had become a neighborhood success. Every morning, customers lined up to try Zoe's churros and the cupcakes she and John made together. It was a typical Saturday morning. The place was full, the air filled with the smell of cinnamon and chocolate. Zoe was behind the counter, helping a woman who ordered half a dozen churros, while John prepared coffee for another customer. The triplets ran around the shop, making more mess than helping. Ethan carried an empty tray like a professional waiter, but bumped into Mason, who nearly knocked over a tower of cups. "Careful," Zoe shouted, laughing at the same time. Liam appeared wearing an apron way too big, dragging on the floor. "Mom, can I serve the customers?" "You're 5, sweetheart." "Not yet." "But I'm responsible." Zoe shook her head, smiling. "You're adorable, but still no." John watched everything with a smile on his face. He had never imagined his life could look like this. Chaotic, noisy, covered in flour, with kids running around, and absolutely perfect. Claire walked in with a huge smile. "Look at this. You're packed." Zoe wiped her hands on her apron. "Who would have thought, huh?" The churro cart turned into an empire. "Small empire," John corrected, carrying a tray of fresh cupcakes. "But it's ours," Zoe said, and the look they exchanged said more than words ever could. Claire ordered a coffee and sat at a table by the window. Derek was there too, helping with small tasks and chatting with customers. "Boss, the flour supplier called. Wants to know if you'll need more stock next week." John nodded. "Tell him yes, twice what we ordered this month." Derek wrote it down. "You know, I never thought I'd see you wearing an apron and making churros." John laughed. "Neither did I. But it suits you. The businessman turned baker look is working." Zoe heard and nudged John. "Who would have thought, huh? The millionaire became the churro master." John turned to her with a playful grin. "And the churro seller became the owner of my heart." Zoe rolled her eyes, blushing. "You're getting more and more cheesy." "It's your fault. You made me this way." She laughed and gave him a gentle push. "Get back to work, Baker." "Yes, ma'am." The rush continued until mid-afternoon. When things finally slowed down, Zoe sat at one of the tables with a cup of tea. John joined her, bringing 2 cupcakes. "Try this. New recipe." She took a bite and her eyes widened. "John, this is amazing. What did you put in here?" "Professional secret." "Tell me." "Never." Zoe tried to get the recipe out of him, and they ended up laughing like children. The boys, tired from running around, sat on the floor near the counter, sharing a giant churro they had stolen from the kitchen. Ethan looked at his parents. "Are you two getting married again?" The question caught them both off guard. Zoe almost choked on her tea. "Ethan, where did you get that idea? Everyone at school has married parents. Why don't you?" Mason nodded. "It's true. That would be cool." Liam just watched, curious to hear the answer. John glanced at Zoe, who looked away, blushing. "Well, that's an adult conversation, boys. But you love each other, don't you?" Mason insisted. John smiled. "Yes, very much." "Then why don't you get married?" Zoe stepped in. "Because marriage isn't just about love. It's about," she hesitated. "It's complicated." "It doesn't seem complicated," Ethan said simply. "It seems easy." The 3 went back to playing, leaving the adults in silence. John looked at Zoe. "They have a point." She stared at him. "John, I'm not asking anything now. I'm just saying, eventually I'd love to marry you again. For real this time. The right way." Zoe felt her heart race. She didn't know if she was ready, but she couldn't deny the thought made her smile. "Let's take it slow, okay?" "Okay." At the end of the day, when the last customer left and Derek said goodbye, Zoe locked the door and turned to John. "Let's take a walk?" "Of course." The 5 of them walked to the nearby plaza, the same place where Zoe used to work with her churro cart. Now, after the renovations John had made months earlier, the place was beautiful, well lit, and filled with families enjoying the evening. The boys ran ahead, playing tag. Zoe and John walked side by side, watching them. "Do you regret it?" Zoe suddenly asked. John frowned. "Regret what?" "Leaving your life as a businessman to become a bakery owner." He stopped and turned to her. "Never. Not for a second. But you had so much money, power, prestige, and it was empty," he said firmly. "All of it was empty, Zoe. This, you, the boys, the bakery, this is real. This is what matters." She smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "You really did change, didn't you?" "I did, because of you." They kept walking, and John took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Zoe didn't pull away. They sat on one of the benches, watching the boys play. The sky was starting to darken, painting everything in orange and pink tones. "You know what I've realized?" Zoe said, breaking the silence. "What?" "The past doesn't hurt anymore." "Not the same way." John nodded. "Same for me. I think we finally made peace with what happened and built something new." He squeezed her hand. Something better. Zoe leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there, just watching the boys and the plaza around them. Ethan shouted from afar, "Dad! Mom! Look what I found!" He ran over with a flower in his hand, smiling. Mason and Liam ran behind him, each holding flowers they had picked from a flower bed. "Boys, you can't pick the flowers," Zoe scolded them, but she was laughing. "But they're for you," Liam said, holding out his. Zoe took the 3 flowers, pretending to be mad. "You're impossible. But you love us," Mason said with a grin. "Unfortunately, yes." The boys laughed and ran back to play. John watched Zoe holding the crushed flowers, smiling, and felt warmth spread through his chest. This was the life he should have chosen all along. Later, when they returned home, the boys were exhausted. Zoe tucked them into bed, one by one, kissing their foreheads. John waited in the living room. When she came back, she sat beside him on the couch. It was a good day. It was. They sat in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then John turned to her. "Zoe, I know you asked to take things slow, and I'll respect that. But there's something I need you to know." She looked at him, curious. "What?" "I love you. Not the way I loved you before, when we were young and naive. I love you in a mature, real way, one that understands love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice. And I choose you. Every day." Tears rolled down Zoe's face. "John, you don't have to say anything now. I just wanted you to know." She wiped the tears and smiled. "I love you too, and I choose you too." John pulled her into a hug, and they stayed like that, holding each other, knowing they had found something rare. A second chance. And this time, they wouldn't let it slip away. The love between them had been reborn. It wasn't the impulsive, fiery love of their youth. It was something deeper, stronger. It was mature, peaceful, sweetened with the same sugar and forgiveness that had flavored their new lives. What did you think of Zoe and John's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And be sure to watch more emotional stories right here on the end screen.